Hello, in this video we're actually going to combine two of the objectives, and that's going to be understand LANs and understand concepts of the internet, intranet, and extranet. So some of the things that we want to define is first we're going to define LAN. So that's our local area network, and this is a group of computers and associated devices that share a common communication. So this would be, again, this would be just computers connected. And typically a LAN is going to be smaller. It's going to be the area that as a network administrator I would be responsible for. And then for right now, we're going to define anything outside of the LAN as a WAN or wide area network. And so a WAN is typically several local area networks that often have limited access to each other, and they're going to be each of the LANs is going to be a corporation or organization, and it's not typically accessible to each of the individual LANs are not typically accessible to the public, but some of their edge resources like routers and web servers are often used as part of our intranet. Some things that we want to some other words that we want to define is intranet. So intranet is a local network. This is going to be a private network, and so this is going to be computers and devices that we're managing that we want to keep the information and resources away from anybody else. So this would be like a business would have an intranet, and that would be our servers, our printers, our storage, our computers, all of the things that we maintain on our own that we would not want someone outside of our organization to have access to. The next term is extranet, and so this is where we have set up our intranet to have partial access to another user. So this is where we would potentially let maybe another corporate partner have access to some of our resources on our network, but we're going to create certain areas that they have access to, and that access is going to be limited. So we can open up the access, and then they use our resources, they use our databases, they use our files, but then when that relationship is done, we will be able to terminate or sever that connection. And then the last one is the internet. So internet is several different networks, and it's each of those networks are owned and managed by different organizations, different businesses, and the internet is what we use to share information globally. And so it's not, it's all of the infrastructure and devices that help make the World Wide Web possible. Another thing that we want to define is firewalls. So a firewall is either a software or a hardware-based security system that allows or denies traffic based on rules that we set up. Let's take a look at a software firewall first. So a software firewall is typically just going to protect a single computer or device. If you open up Windows 10 and go into the control panel, you'll see that there is actually a firewall, a software firewall on all applications of Windows 10. And that firewall is just going to protect your computer. So if you were to go onto a network with other computers that have that turned off or don't, that are not running their firewall, your firewall cannot protect their computers. It's a lot less expensive, but with that, it's also a lot less robust. There are not as many things, not as many settings, not as many security features or protocols that we can run on a software firewall, because it's mostly just intended to protect that one operating system. Then we also have a hardware firewall, and this would protect an entire network. It could also protect a network segment, as we'll see later if we break up our network into a private, a perimeter, and an external network, or we could also call it an intranet, an extranet, and the intranet. It's a dedicated hardware appliance, so this firewall is not going to do anything else. We're not typically going to set up we wouldn't want our firewall to be part of our server, because if our firewall is compromised in any way, it compromises everything that's connected to it. And so this is when we talk about a hardware firewall, we're talking about a dedicated device, and its only purpose is to act as a firewall and filter out packets going in and out. It is more expensive than a software firewall, but it provides a lot better performance and security for a network. This is what a firewall would look like. So we see over on the left-hand side, we see our little network of computers there. And then on the right, we have the internet, the big bad internet, where all kinds of bad people are out there wanting to get into our information. And so in between, we're going to set up our firewall, our network firewall. And again, typically this is going to be a hardware device. And the purpose of this device is to it's going to let any request for connection out of our network, but anything coming in, it's automatically going to block. And so we would have to set up our access list to allow other things in. So some definitions that we want to look at as we move on talking about firewalls is our demilitarized zone, or DMZ. This is we can create kind of a network outside of our network that's not fully in the internet, and we can put things on there that we can control, like files, not file servers, but we could put web servers out there, or if there's like an FTP server that we want clients or customers to be able to reach, we could put that out there. We will also see, I believe that on the test, you'll probably see it not called a DMZ, but you'll see it called a perimeter network. And so a DMZ, or a perimeter network, is any area of our network that is outside of our private network, but is still under our security and control. And then an access control list. So this is actually the rules that we use to tell the firewall what data and what traffic we want blocked or allowed through the firewall. So here we see a simple diagram of a DMZ. So we see over on the left-hand side, so this would be our private or internal network, our intranet, as it were. And we're going to have the highest level of security. So that firewall that you see to the right of that, that's going to block most, if not all, incoming traffic requests. And then it's going to allow any traffic request coming from our network to open up and head out. And then in the middle, we're going to have we'll go all the way over to the left at first. So all the way over on the left, we see the internet. And so between the internet and our DMZ, our low security zone, we're going to have another firewall. On that firewall, we see there, we've actually denoted that packets or ports 80 and 443 are open on that firewall. And we can see why, because in the middle, we actually have a web server sitting in our low security, or DMZ. Again, we might call this a perimeter network. And so what we see here is setting up this DMZ or perimeter network allows us to give access to our web server to people out on the internet. So people that are on the internet, they want to reach our web server. The web server doesn't really serve much purpose if people on the internet can't reach it. And so that first firewall on the right is going to allow that typical web traffic on our HTTP traffic on port 80 or HTTPS traffic on port 443. It's going to allow it directly through to the web server. But then we've got a higher security firewall on the other side between our intranet and the DMZ. And that's going to, so if somebody were to come in through the internet and kind of compromise our web server, they're still not going to get into our private network, and they're not going to have access to our company files and information and resources. Here we see a single device firewall. And what we would do with this is, so sometimes we can have just one device that will operate kind of in the place of those two firewalls before, and it'll have separate ports. And so what we can see here is it kind of just it's like imagining that we are splitting this firewall in half, and part of it is on the outside facing the internet, and then part of it is on the inside between our DMZ and our private network. A single device firewall, while it's obviously going to be less expensive, Part of the danger with that is if somebody does compromise that internet-facing portion of the firewall, it could compromise the entire firewall and let somebody right into our private network. The next thing that we want to talk about is the virtual private network. So we would call that a VPN. And a virtual private network is actually where we set up a connection through the network or through an untrusted network, and we use that to send private information, just as we would over our private network connection. And this is done using encryption. So basically what it is let's say that we have a home office and a satellite office, and we want to be able to send our information between those two, but we don't want anybody to intercept it. So we could set up a VPN, and it would essentially tunnel our traffic through the public internet, but it would be encrypted so that it would not be accessible or usable by anybody outside of our network. Here we see we can have a couple different types of VPNs. So this would be a host-to-host VPN. So this is where one computer is going to establish a connection through the internet to one other computer. We can also have a site-to-site VPN. So that would be like on the bottom there. We see an entire network. There's a VPN that goes through and connects through the internet to another entire network. With this, we would typically see the VPN would be set up between the gateway routers on each network. And if we set up a VPN this way, site to site, the computers are actually going to communicate with each other, not even realizing that they're leaving our network. We could also have kind of a hybrid there where we might have a host to site. So that would be one computer connecting through the internet to that gateway router and establishing a network that encrypted transmission from the one computer into our network. So that's information for understanding LANs and the understanding concepts of the internet, intranet, and extranet objectives.